Welcome back. Happy holidays, guys. It's almost New Year's Eve 2024. And we're back with, this is our last, or I guess penultimate stream before episode 100, so I'm super excited for that. But with the Finetooth Shark, Carcharhinus isodon. So, super excited to cover the species. And I hope everybody's having a good holiday season. It's kind of fun, like, I think when I was younger, I used to kind of burn out by the time Christmas was over, and it was like, oh man, there's not much to do now. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of been more comfortable extending the holiday season. So and I didn't realize that Epiphany was a thing traditionally, where Epiphany I think is January 6th or 7th. But basically, you can kind of keep everything up and keep the festivities going well into the next month. So that's kind of the mood I'm in, and hope everybody's in a similar mood. So yeah. But tonight we're covering a really cool species that actually does live on the east coast of the United States, and also in South America, on the east coast of South America, and I believe the Finetooth Shark is also found in Central America too. But it's not a really well-known species, and it's tricky, I would say, as far as like sharks that get most easily misidentified with other species. Finetooth Shark is probably one of the biggest culprits. It's one of the classic, like, small Carcharhinus sharks, and there's quite a few species. At least in the United States, there's quite a few species on the East Coast. Like, we have the bull sharks, the sandbar sharks, blacktips, spinners, small tail sharks, even sharp-nosed sharks, which are not Carcharhinus, but they're still small and in the same family. So it's very easy to get them all confused, and it's going to be really cool to kind of figure out what makes a Finetooth Shark a Finetooth Shark, and what differentiates the species, both in its appearance, but then also in its habitat use and its behavior. So very excited to learn more about the species. But first, thank you so much, Howard Kerr, for your really great art on the Finetooth Shark. I especially appreciate the the attention to detail as far as like the pointed snout. This is actually something that kind of helps distinguish or narrows down the species versus other Carcharhinus sharks. For example, bull sharks have a very blunt snout, so not like some of the Carcharhinus have a pointed snout. Some of them have a blunt snout, so I really appreciate that attention to detail. And I also especially appreciate that the shark in this illustration, who is a girl, sorry, I almost said he, she is going after menhaden. So menhaden are a really cool fish. This is great attention to detail, so thank you, Howard. Menhaden are super cool because I think the best way to describe them is like miniature whales, where they're plankton feeders. They have these really proportionate to their bodies, pretty large gill rakers that they use to strain plankton out of the water. And in doing that, they actually form a pretty vital link between the energy-rich plankton and larger predators like sharks. So menhaden are basically like shark superfood. Like, they're really, really, really energetically important fish. Because other fish have to like eat other fish and other like zooplankton and other things to kind of like build up the same amount of energy, but menhaden directly eat phytoplankton, so they're actually extremely energy rich, and it's a huge snack for sharks. So I really love that attention to detail. We have a lot of menhaden on the east coast of the United States, so it's a really important, it's a fish that's near and dear to my heart because of how important it is for the ecosystem here. So thank you, Howard, for that really great detail. I really appreciate it, and this art is awesome as always. So thank you for submitting this work on the Finetooth Shark. So let's go in and get started. I have some announcements later in the stream, so we'll wait for hopefully more people to jump on. I know it's the holiday season, and people may be busy, may or may not be busy, but if more people can come on, I do have a fun announcement, for regarding next week's White Shark stream, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, so the Finetooth Shark, I think I pulled this up last week, or sorry, not last week, 2 weeks ago. This is the new VIMS Shark Guide, which is kind of unfortunately a little hard to find on the web, but it's really cool, and it has a breakdown of all the Virginia shark species, which also, most of them can be found just kind of along the East Coast, Gulf of Mexico, New England, the Carolinas, and Florida. So even though it's a Virginia-specific guide, it's not limited to this region. But here's a nice overview of what a Finetooth Shark looks like. So at first, it kind of seems like a generic Carcharhinus a little bit, where you could see a lot of similarities between spinner sharks or even black-nosed sharks. I think this kind of looks most similar to a black-nosed shark to me, but there are a couple distinctions. So firstly, and the nice thing is this guide marks this out pretty well. No interdorsal ridge, so that's a tricky feature that would only apply if you had the shark on the boat, or if, you probably couldn't see that really well in the field. But if you were fishing and you had the shark on the boat, the dorsal ridge is something that helps distinguish Carcharhinus from one another. But that one's probably not that useful if you were diving with the shark. So let's see the second feature. Second dorsal fin origin over behind anal fin origin. So that's a little bit better. So that's a little subtle detail, but that is something that can be helpful for distinguishing the species from others. Gill slits as long as the first dorsal base. So the shark has fairly large gill slits. Still helpful, but still quite subtle. No dark tips on pectoral fins and tail. Z-line may be indistinct. So the Z-line is this light feature over here. You see how it kind of makes a Z shape. But that feature, no dark tips on the pectoral fins and tail, that actually is really useful because when you look at just the physical shape of this species, it does look a lot like a spinner or blacktip, or again, even a black-nosed shark. But it's lacking the markings. It has that same kind of like sleek feel or that sleek build, like the other sharks. But there's no. Oops, sorry. Where are we? But there's no black tips on any of the fins. So that is one thing that kind of helps narrow the species down. It looks a little too slight to be a bull shark. The dorsal fin is not large enough to be a sandbar shark. And then again, it doesn't have like the black tips that black tip sharks or spinner sharks have. So finally, 5, the teeth. I wonder if we can get a good view of the teeth. This is really, I had a tab open here. There we go. This is really probably the distinguishing feature of the species and why it's named a Finetooth shark, is the fact that the upper and lower teeth look essentially the same, and they're both narrow. And this is very unusual for Carcharhinus sharks. Usually Carcharhinus sharks have the narrow lower teeth, but the upper teeth are broad, typically. And they're kind of more like slashing teeth. Typically in the upper jaw of a Carcharhinus, like a bull shark or a sandbar shark, it's typically like these broad triangular teeth that are great for slashing prey, and then the lower teeth are like kind of more the spiked teeth that are good for like stabbing prey or hooking prey. Like it's great for grasping slippery fish. But for the Finetooth shark, both teeth, the upper teeth and the lower teeth, are actually pointed, and narrow. So very weird feature, and this is where the shark gets its name. So you could assume that it probably is exclusively a fish eater, and it doesn't go after larger prey. So that probably would make the most sense for this particular species. This is actually really nice to see a diagram of the Finetooth shark in life. So let's see other features. So again, no interdorsal ridge. Cobalt blue back. So that's actually kind of cool. This probably would be more apparent in life. Sharks in life tend to retain more of their color, and then as they're captured or stressed, their color starts to fade. So this photograph in particular probably won't be the best example of the cobalt blue, but good to know. Again, no black tips on the fins, and then you have that note about the teeth, but that would be that would be almost impossible to see in the field. So, the snout is pointed. I would actually say also the snout is kind of really short. Looking back at the Vim's guide, it kind of looks like for this shark, the head is really almost compressed looking. I feel like bull sharks have a much larger, they have a broad snout and a short snout, but overall, I feel like bull sharks have kind of like a bigger head overall, and sandbar sharks, they have more of a pointed snout and like a larger snout. It's kind of interesting to see for the Finetooth shark. Everything seems to be kind of more smushed, like concentrated in like a smaller head and a smaller snout. So kind of interesting to see that. And it's also interesting to see proportionally the snout versus the gills, where like the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, they all seem quite a bit like they're taking up the same space as the gill slits, as far as like the amount of area covered. So yeah, kind of I feel like it has, and it could be just me, but I feel like the Finetooth Shark kind of has a bit of a smaller head proportionally compared to other shark species. So we'll make a note of that as we continue. Yep, again, kind of larger gill slits. But really, overall... And yeah, I think I am right that, like, the head seems to be more interiorly focused, where it's just, like, the eyes, the snout, the tip of the snout, and then the nostrils, they all seem kind of really close together, and then you kind of have, like, a large cheek, almost reminiscent of, like, a sand tiger shark, interestingly enough. And then... pointed snout right here. And actually, that is a bit of an unusually pointed snout, so that is actually a good identifying feature for this species. So, very cool. I feel like anglers get this one confused very easily with the other small coastal sharks. Sharp-nosed sharks have a much longer body and have white spots. The sandbar sharks, again, have a large dorsal fin. The black tips and spinners have black tips on their fins, and then bull sharks, they have that classic like stocky look with really tiny eyes. So, but yeah. So what we'll do, we'll just kind of dive into the Finetooth Shark's general biology. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of footage of this species, and I think part of the problem is it's a very hard one to identify. So there's not a lot of like YouTube clips or footage of the Finetooth Shark, but we can still just kind of go into the general biology. And then there's a lot of research on this species, which I was a bit surprised by because it's not a very well-known species. So we could just go into the general biology and then expound upon the research. So here we go. So looking again at Florida Museum of Natural History, really great first resource for if you want to get a broad overview of a shark. This is a really good place to start. So, especially for, I would say, Atlantic shark species, maybe even a couple of, like, Eastern Pacific shark species, but Finetooth Shark. Carcharhinus isodon. This small, slender shark gets its name from its rows of small, fine, clear teeth. This social shark forms schools to hunt fish like menhaden and mullet, sometimes energetically chasing them into the beach surf. Interesting. Mullet is also a really big shark food. I am not really sure what mullet eat, actually. Menhaden, again, eat the phytoplankton, but mullet, I'm not exactly sure what they go after. But both are very, very famous shark snacks. And I would say, actually, those are the top two, at least on the east coast of the U.S., those are the top two shark foods for coastal sharks are menhaden and mullet. So, to the point where, like, I personally get nervous if I'm in an area with a lot of mullet. Like, if I was, like, snorkeling or something and there was mullet nearby, like I just know that they're a favorite, so that makes me a little nervous, but... interesting common names. We have the Finetooth Shark, the Even-Tooth Shark, which I really like, actually. I think Finetooth is a good name, but the Even-Tooth is... It just sounds kind of cool. Night Shark is not a good name because there is already a night shark, Carcharhinus signatus. So that would be very confusing, especially since it lives in the same area. I mean, I guess night sharks, they do live offshore, but they're in the same range. They are also on the east coast of the U.S., so... And then the smooth-tooth shark, which I guess is not that bad. So... We'll kind of scan through this, but I am very curious to learn more about this species. To my knowledge, it does not go into estuaries, really. Maybe further south in its range, but it's not a Chesapeake Bay species. It is a Virginia seacoast species, but it doesn't go into the bay. So, here we go. Considered to have little overall economic importance to the commercial shark fishery. Let's see. Kind of like this note. While the shark is not involved in any reported injuries, care should be taken when handling these sharks. So these are very small. I feel like the maximum size is not only, let's see, not even like 5 feet. Let me make sure I got that right. I'm just kind of scanning through really quickly. Oh, I'm mistaken. The maximum reported size is about 11 feet. That's actually pretty big for a Carcharhinus shark. Average length for males is 5 to 7 feet, while females average about 5.9 to 7.5 feet. And that actually makes it even more interesting that it can be that large, but it has this unique dentition of small teeth. So I'm curious to learn what it eats. I mean, it did say menhaden mullet, but I'm curious to learn. Well, I guess that makes sense. If it is targeting menhaden mullet and it's targeting this energy-rich food, it's kind of like how, you know, like some of the largest animals in the world, like they eat some of the smallest because the smallest are linked more directly to the sun and photosynthesis. So menhaden are just one step away because they eat plankton directly. So it kind of makes sense that fine-tooth sharks, if they have a high menhaden diet, like a diet that's rich in menhaden, kind of makes sense that they can grow to a larger size. You know, if they're like menhaden specialists, it kind of makes sense that they can still attain that large size because they are still getting a lot of energy. So pretty interesting. Conservation, they're considered to be least concerned, so that's really encouraging that the shark is doing okay. A lot of American sharks are in conservation trouble, but it's really great to see that there's a shark species on the East Coast that is actually doing well, and a coastal shark species on the East Coast is actually doing well. So. Gillnet bands in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Texas have proved to be helping the population of these sharks. Due to the coastal nature of the shark, they avoid most gillnet fishing that occurs out of state waters. Fine-tooth sharks are also managed in the U.S. Fishery Management Plan of Atlantic tuna, swordfish, and sharks. Okay. Oh, this is pretty interesting. Let's double check this. So this is say that fine-tooth sharks can be found in North America, Cuba, temperate waters of South America, and then Western Africa. But let's check the most recent map to verify that, because it looks like IUCN Red List is not showing the fine-tooth shark in Africa. So maybe this population is a different shark species that was misidentified. We do have confirmed populations in southern Brazil. Interesting. No confirmed ranges here. Confirmed populations in Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. No confirmed population in Cuba. Interesting. So that actually may have been later to be proved to be a different species. Confirmed populations in the Gulf of Mexico, southern Florida, and the east coast of the U.S. And the map is going up to Virginia, but it should include Virginia because you can find the shark in Virginia. So very rare because it likes warmer water, but still you can find it up here. So. Although there have been reports of the shark in the eastern Atlantic Ocean, in particular in Senegal and Guinea-Bissau, these sightings have not been confirmed and may be a result of confusion with the spinner shark, Carcharhinus parapinna. Interesting. So, and that makes sense. They do morphologically look very similar, but again, fine-tooth sharks don't have the spots, the black tips that all spinner sharks do. Okay, habitat. Residing waters close to shores of depths of 10 meters, those coastal species often form schools. The deepest water they go is 152 meters, so it's a very shallow. As far as sharks go, it's a very shallow species. Adults do come in shallow waters of South Carolina during the warm summer months and migrate south when surface water temperature drop below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. This population of fine-tooth sharks spends the winter months in the waters off the coast of Florida. These sharks are often found near estuaries, lagoons, bays, and river mouths, as well as the salinities within their range. Interesting. So it looks like they're close to these kinds of areas, which are pretty common in the U.S., or the east coast of the U.S., because you have Chesapeake Bay, Pamlico Sound, what do you call that? Like the Low Country Islands, the Low Country area of South Carolina and Georgia. But it's interesting that it sounds like they don't go into the estuaries still, because they probably want that full seawater. So, distinguishing characteristics: the snout is pointed, shorter than the width of the mouth. First dorsal fin originates behind the insertion point of the pectoral fins along the inner margin. The undersides of the pectoral fins are pure white, and the fins are unmarked. So I'm glad that, again, they reaffirmed that the snout is one way to tell the species apart from other species. Let's double check that. Yeah, you can kind of see that. Can they show they won't show an underside view, but you can kind of see that where like I was saying, like the snout was compressed earlier. I'm glad that they're kind of confirming that as something, as a way to identify the species. So let's see. Biology. Small in size, with a long pointed snout and fairly large eyes. The gill slits are very long, about half the length of the base of the dorsal fin. It's kind of interesting that the gills are long, and I wonder why that is. And again, it does remind me a little bit, I know this is a complete different group, but it does remind me of sand tiger sharks a little bit, because sand tiger sharks have like the big cheek and like large gills, and sand tiger sharks also occupy a very similar habitat where they are a primarily coastal species. They do like to stick in shallow water, or stick to shallow water. You can't really find them in open water for the most part, so... Species of appearance similar to the Finetooth shark include the lemon shark. I think a lemon shark is pretty easy to tell apart because it has two large dorsal fins, and they have just kind of like a more, kind of like a huskier look to them, and their skin is more olive to yellow, hence their name. So, the black tip shark and the spinner shark, which makes sense that they could be confused. The lemon shark can be distinguished by its second dorsal fin. It's almost as large as first dorsal. Yep. And then black tip shark and spinner shark have black tip fins, while the fine tooth shark lacks any distinguishing markings. So that's actually kind of cool to see that it's not as many species as you would think that it could get confused with, and that they're actually those are pretty easy to tell apart. Like I feel like at first glance, if you were comparing a bunch of Atlantic sharks, it would be really hard to tell them apart. But if you look for these like little clues, like these little features, it's like, oh, actually that's actually really easy. So fine-tooth sharks are the ones that don't have the black tips, and they still have like a large first dorsal fin and a small second dorsal fin. So interesting. The upper teeth are narrow and weakly serrated or smooth. The lower teeth are erect with smooth cusps. Again, kind of large. For such a small tooth type, it's really interesting that they get to be that big. This predator mainly feeds on small bony fishes, including mullet, Spanish mackerel, spot, and Atlantic menhaden. This shark also preys on marine invertebrates, including cephalopods, which are like squid, and crustaceans. Interesting. Oh, there's a mullet. So, again, very favorite shark snack for a lot of different species. Gestation is approximately 12 months, with the females moving into the nursery areas in late May. Birth occurs from late May to mid-June. Each litter numbers 1 to 13 pups. No notes on whether or not this species takes a break. So, 12-month, like a year-long gestation period is it's okay, I guess, among sharks. But some sharks that are cousins to the species, they will have like an 18-month or a 9. What is it? It's 18 months. Sorry, it's 18-month gestation period and 18-month break. So it's like a 3-year reproductive cycle. So, like the dusky shark. There we go. Large sharks, including the dusky shark, is a predator of the species, which makes sense. Dusky sharks are huge. They are the biggest member of the genus Carcharhinus, so they get to be about 14 feet long. And it makes sense that dusky sharks go after fine-tooth sharks. So, the fine-tooth shark was originally named Carcharhinus isodon in 1839. The species name isodon means equal tooth, for the same number of teeth located in upper and lower jaws. That's actually pretty interesting, because like isodon, it's kind of like the word orthodontist, like don is the word for tooth, or heterodontiforms. Don, again, heterodontiforms. Hetero means different, so heterodontiforms are like different teeth. The Latin name translates to different teeth. So isodon means same teeth, or equal tooth. That's actually pretty cool to kind of compare the two. So, alright. So already kind of learned a lot about this species, and the fact that it's actually maybe not as difficult to identify as first glance might show, because It has like that kind of it's a pointed snout, but it's kind of a compressed face overall. Um, no black tips, and there's not really a lot you could mistake it with if you were at least in the East Coast United States. You could tell it apart pretty easily from the others. So, ooh, that's a nice view of a fine-tooth shark. And again, it looks in this particular shot, physically it looks a lot like a black tip shark, but it doesn't have the black tips. So, black tip sharks similarly have like kind of like that cool, sleek, pointed look with their fins, but again, no black tips here. So, great English names: the even-tooth shark, the smooth-tooth shark. Don't like the night shark because we already have one. See if sharkreference.com has anything else. Nope, it doesn't really have any new information, so we'll kind of keep looking because we do have a lot of cool research to go through tonight, so very excited to take a closer look. Conservation-wise, the fine-tooth shark is doing pretty okay. It is nearly threatened, and that was a fairly recent assessment, 2019. So let's check out what's going on with this species in general. Alright. The fine-tooth shark is a medium-sized coastal shark found in the Northwest Atlantic and Southwest Atlantic Oceans from North Carolina. And again, you can find the species in Virginia. It's rare, but you can find it up here. To the Gulf of Mexico and isolated areas in the Caribbean Sea and down to Brazil. It occurs off beaches, in bays, estuaries, and river mouths from the intertidal to a depth of 20 meters. This is really, really shallow. Florida Museum was talking about how it could be found in slightly deeper water, or not slightly, but deeper waters of 150 meters, which kind of makes more sense, but I have heard that fine-tooth sharks are concentrated in very shallow areas, and physically, since it's so similar looking to like a sand tiger as far as like having like the big cheeks and like the big gills, and it occupies such a similar habitat, not surprised that maybe this species could be concentrated in shallow waters, but the maximum depth is 150 meters, but it's not surprising that the IUCN Red List is saying that it's saying it could live down to 20 meters. So either way, it's a very shallow shark. As far as sharks go, that's a really shallow depth limit. So, and typically that would be a problem, because you can't really escape fisheries or fishing pressure at shallow depths because you're so close to a lot of human impact. But it looks like somehow this species is doing well. So let's see, is caught as target catch and bycatch of coastal commercial fisheries, primarily for meat. In Northwest Atlantic, where management exists, fine-tooth shark has annually increased by 3.5%, with the median change over 3 generation lengths. The corresponding probabilities for rates of population change all indicate increasing population. So this species is growing. Interesting. However, in the Southwest Atlantic Ocean, the species was formerly common in the 70s and 80s, but due to intense unmanaged fishing pressure, there have been few records of the species in the past decade. Consequently, it is suspected the species has undergone a population reduction of over 80% over the past 3 generation lengths, which is 23 years, in the Southwest Atlantic portion of its range. Overall, due to Brazil occupying about 20% of its overall global range, and the increasing population in the Northwest Atlantic, it is suspected the fine-tooth shark has undergone a population reduction of 20 to 29%, so that's not as bad as a lot of sharks. Because as we've seen, some sharks are in like the 80s or 90s, so to be 20 or 29%, not that bad. Over the past 3 generation lengths due to levels of exploitation, is assessed as near threatened, close to meaning vulnerable. So, interesting. Interesting that the species is growing in the Northwest Atlantic, and the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is this potentially predator release? Meaning that, because like dusky sharks, which are said to be a predator of this species, dusky sharks are not doing well at all. They're endangered. They've been really heavily fished outside of this same area. Same with sandbar sharks. Sandbar sharks, they get to be pretty big, not as big as duskies, but they do get to be pretty big, and they are also endangered, and they've been heavily overfished. And I just wonder if there's a lot of cases of predator release where large sharks, when they're removed from an environment, the little sharks can take their place and take their niches. Like there's a lot of opportunity for smaller sharks to come in and it's kind of like the new Batman where what is it? It was like Carmine Falcone or Falcone, or I don't know how they pronounce it now in the new one with Robert Pattinson, but he's down and the Penguin is moving in. It's basically the same thing where like if you remove a big shark, the little ones come in to take the spot. So I wonder if that's what's going on, and I definitely want to put a pin in that just as we go through the research tonight to see why is this shark growing. Like it's so unusual for a shark to be growing in the Northwest Atlantic, especially since there's still fisheries happening. Sharks are really slow to grow, reproduce. So why is it growing? And my guess is it might be predator release. It might be the fact that its predators are being hunted out, unfortunately. So, but we'll see. So, looking at good old fish space, actually, it's kind of cool to see all these different photos of fine-tooth sharks. This is a species that even though it lives kind of in my backyard, I'm not as familiar with it because it's just not talked about as much. This is a juvenile. And again, you can kind of see the same features where no tips on the fins. One way to tell it apart, again, from the sharp-nosed sharks is that there's no spots. So if it's a shark that has a pointed snout, no spots, no black tips, no markings whatsoever, it's probably a fine-tooth shark. If you are fishing or diving or kind of patrolling the beach on the east coast of the U.S. So dusky sharks have dusky tips on their fins, and they just look different. Their dorsal fin placement is different. They are much bigger. Again, sandbar sharks have the bigger dorsal fin. So when I really kind of go through the library of sharks in my head, it's like, yeah, the fine-tooth shark, you can tell it apart, fairly easily if you kind of think about it for a bit. So interesting. Just scanning through Fishbase. Fishbase is also saying that the maximum depth is 20 meters, which is extremely shallow. Commonly found close inshore, forms large schools, feeds on small bony fishes and cephalopods, live birth, viviparous with the yolk-sac placenta, so analogous to mammals, which is pretty interesting. 1 to 6 young per litter. And not much else from Fishbase, so I think we'll keep moving on. Shout out to Sharks for Kids. This is a really great website, or not website, but group. Really great outreach group, and I really like what Sharks for Kids does. So that's actually a nice photo of a fine-tooth shark. There we go. And this one is a larger individual, potentially an adult. Definitely looks a lot more robust than the other photo. Beautiful eyes. I know the resolution isn't really great, but just these really nice, pretty pale aquamarine eyes over here. So I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit so you can kind of get the eye color. Again, not so good resolution, but very, very pretty eye color. One thing I do love about shark eyes is just like they have this kind of like primordial look to them. They make me think of like, almost like reptilian eyes, but like dinosaur eyes. Like there's just something about shark eyes that are just really beautiful and just very different from a lot of other animals. Like it's just I know it sounds cliche, but it's like an ancient look. So let me get out of here so we can go back to shark references. So little summary in the fine-tooth shark. We'll just kind of scan through it just to shout out any new facts we have on the species. Again, dark bluish gray or bronze on the dorsal side. So it's kind of cool to read about a shark that has a bluish hue, because it sounds strange, but not a lot of sharks actually have that color. Sharks, you're typically gray, or coastal sharks like this are typically gray with like an iridescent sheen. But you famously have the blue shark, but the blue shark is kind of an anomaly as far as sharks go, just having that beautiful indigo hue. So it's kind of cool to see that there's a shark that also has like a bluish color, or cobalt, as it was described in a different source. So No dorsal ridge, pretty much the same features. Caudal fin is forked, straight upper lobe, significantly longer than lower lobe. Okay, so kind of conflicting facts a little bit. They are not known to swim deeper than 152 meters. So some people are saying 20 meters, some people are saying 152. I trust the latter, but that this species prefers to be in 20 meters or less. So they can be found in lagoons, river mouths, estuaries, and bays. Finetooth sharks are called the United States Carolina coast home, migrate to the Florida coast during the winter months. So this is actually really cool because I think of probably the biggest shark migration that I'm familiar with is blacktip sharks going from Florida in the winter to the Virginia coast, New Jersey, mid-Atlantic waters in the summer. So that's a pretty large migratory range. Dusky sharks and sandbar sharks do something similar. But finetooth sharks, it's kind of cool to see that they have a smaller migration. It's still migration, like they're going from Florida up the coast, but they're not going to go as far as blacktip sharks or sandbars or duskies. So, and I kind of think that's really cool, like just to see kind of the limitations and just how this shark prefers warmer waters. Let's see. Finetooth shark's diet consists largely of bony fish, including mackerel, mullet, and menhaden. Pups are born between May and June. That's actually a pretty small window, because sandbar. Well, actually, you know what? Let me take that back, because I was about to say sandbar sharks also pup May to June. Smoothhounds pup April to May, I want to say. So maybe that actually is not as small as I think it is. That actually might be pretty standard for sharks. So interesting, or at least sharks in this part of the world. Okay, so nice little rundown on the species. Again, really like that photograph of finetooth shark. So. We'll keep going. Fishes of North Carolina. Here we go. This is actually new, or it's not a new website, but it's new to us. So I'm kind of curious to learn more about it, especially since I kind of really like this classic illustration. This is one that I really kind of grew up with as far as shark books of old, and also early online resources. Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO illustration. It's pretty cool to see this. So, back in 2002, Lord of the Rings: Two Towers came out for the first time ever. So, let's see. We'll skim through this. Snout moderately long and pointed. Snout tip without a dark blotch. That's actually really cool that they talk about this, because the black-nosed shark specifically has this feature, so it's kind of nice that they make a point to say that the finetooth shark doesn't have this, so that you can tell it apart from a black-nosed shark. No black tip on fins. Okay. Oh, there it is, the black-nosed shark. So yeah, for comparison, here is the black-nosed shark with the intentional black. It's actually really pretty in life. I have seen these before in life, and they're actually really pretty. It seems like such a strange feature, but they're really cool when you see them, swimming in the water, and that distinct black marking is the first thing that you see. Black-nosed sharks are cool as far as it's such a small feature, but it kind of it's a cool way to distinguish it from other sharks. So this bull shark diagram is interesting. I do appreciate the attention to the bull shark's teeth, because this is kind of what I was talking about at the top of the stream, where it's unusual for finetooth sharks to have the narrow upper teeth, because a lot of Carcharhinus, like the bull shark, they have the broad heart-shaped serrated teeth that are for slashing large prey items. So this is kind of a funny bull shark illustration. This is probably an illustration of a deceased individual, because it looks a little bit dried out. The fins look correct, but the body looks a little bit thinner. So this drawing is probably of a juvenile or maybe a dried out individual, because usually bull sharks have that stockier, girthier look to them. So, ooh, spinner shark. So that's a preserved specimen right there, but you can actually see that the spinner shark's face or head is a bit longer, kind of more stretched out than the fine-tooth sharks, and again, it has the black markings. Blacktip shark, this illustration in particular is not correct, because blacktip sharks famously do not have a black tip on their anal fin, so this is actually a spinner shark that was misidentified, so kind of fun shark trivia right there. Alright, we'll keep looking, but shout out to Fishes of North Carolina. This is a pretty cool website. It looks like a pretty serious fish website. Let me just take a look at the marine species, if they have like how they arrange. Oh, cool. They arrange it by family. Let's look at Carcharhinidae just for fun. Oh, there it is. So that's really cool. So they have like a record of all the sharks that come into North Carolina. That's actually really cool by family. That's actually really cool. These are all the Carcharhinus sharks. Oceanic white tip. It's a typo, but still, you know what it is. What else do we have? Oh, Cedaridae basking shark. Very cool. Yeah, this is a cool website. I actually really like how this is arranged. So awesome. All right. So I think those are all kind of like the general profiles of the fine-tooth shark. So now we're going to transition a little bit more into research. So, and this is a good night for it. It's quiet. It's just, I really love this time of year where it's just like, it's kind of like after, I don't want to say like Christmas is like the big holiday, but like, you know, I kind of feel like most of just like the festivities as far as like shopping and stuff is centered around Christmas, and so it's like once it's over, I feel like it's like kind of like that nice pause and that kind of nice break, you know, and just I like the quiet this time of year. So point being, it's a good night to study sharks. Good night for like just chilling out and learning more about this really cool group of animals. So with that, let's check out. I think this is a official FAO field guide, so we'll check out the entry on the fine-tooth shark. So here we go. Interesting illustration. This is probably a superlative, like probably a very large individual, because it looks just a little bit different from everything else that we've seen. Specifically the snout. That looks a lot larger than the photographs and the descriptions that we've seen. This tooth also doesn't look as narrow as some of the descriptions, like the diagnostic features, or diagnostic descriptions. So, but let's see if we can read anything new on behavior. I won't spend any time on like physical features. Let's see. Interesting. Bogman. So two scientists, Bogman and Springer, consider the long gill slits to be an important distinguishing feature, which I actually agree with, because they do seem unusually large for Carcharhinus. Body color is gray-blue above. Some specimens can have green eyes, but this may be a localized trait for specimens from the Florida Panhandle. Interesting. That's actually really cool. I've never heard of shark eye color being a potential indicator where the shark is from. That's actually really cool. Also, very large range from this account. New York south to Cuba. So all the other accounts are saying that it's North Carolina southward. And I've been saying it's Virginia. It does live in Virginia because it does. But it's kind of cool to see this confirmation. Like, yeah, no, you can find the shark up in New York. And that makes sense because Virginia and New York, they're part of the same ecoregion. So there's not really a big difference between the two. As far as the ocean goes, terrestrial ecoregion, fairly, there's some difference, but for the marine ecoregion, it's pretty much the same ocean. So, clear parts of the Bahamas, the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean along the south coast of Cuba. Habitat coastal in depths as shallow as 4 meters. Distinguished from the small-tailed shark by the second dorsal fin origin. And that's it. Not much else on the species in this account, so we'll hop right on over to the next one. Here's a really classic guide I really love. The Sharks, Batoids, and Chimeras of the North Atlantic. So these FAO guides, I think they're so helpful. It's kind of cool to see. It looks like the Finetooth Shark has been misappropriated, like the name has been misappropriated to other species in shark history. So you've got porbeagle, Lamnonassus, and there's the porbeagle right here. Let's see what else we got. Oh, here he is, Carcharhinus, isodon, Finetooth Shark. Let's see. In Spanish, the Tiburon dentalizo. Love that Spanish name. Really great diagram of the teeth right here. This is the same illustration as we saw earlier on the Fishes in North Carolina website. Okay. Details about diagnostic features. We don't need to read these. Again, you can find it from New York to Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. Let's see. An old Cuban record is apparently airness, but is definitely recorded but rare from Trinidad, Guyana, and southern Brazil. Records of the species from eastern Atlantic off Senegal and Guinea-Bissau is most likely that of a different Carcharhinus species and not Carcharhinus isodon. Interesting. Okay. Habitat: a locally common, highly active migratory shark, most abundant off the warm temperate and tropical Atlantic coast of the USA, where it moves northwards to live and breed close inshore off South Carolina and Georgia during the spring and summer, when the surface water is warmer than 20 degrees Celsius, and moves out to Florida in fall when the surface water cools to below 20 degrees Celsius. So that's actually very similar to bull sharks. Like this shark and bull sharks, they kind of have a very similar temperature range. They both really like the warm water. So, and it's literally, I forget what it was for bull shark specifically, but it's somewhere in the 20s as far as Celsius goes, like 20 degrees Celsius. It's around the same range. What is that? Is it 60? It's in the high 60s in Fahrenheit. So let's see, Celsius to Fahrenheit. 68. So it's about 68 degrees in Fahrenheit. So above 68 degrees, you can find fine-toothed sharks. Below 68 degrees, they want to move south. So, peaks in abundance on the east coast of Florida are recorded in late fall and winter, and again in spring, with surface temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius. A distinct run or mass movement of this shark occurs past Daytona Beach, Florida, during the first week of April, as large schools of aggregations move northwards to Georgia and South Carolina. This is really cool. So that's a lot like the blacktip shark migration. Like the really famous one that I think Blue Planet 2 did a special on. So pretty cool to know that this shark is actually undertaking a very similar movement. So it is not known what the relationship is between the migratory breeding East Coast population and fine-toothed sharks that occur in the Gulf of Mexico and southwards. It generally occurs close inshore on the intercontinental shelf from the intertidal and surf zone to about 20 meters. Biology. We'll kind of scan through this. So we know it gives live birth. We know it gives birth May to June. The female fine-toothed shark has a 2-year reproductive cycle in the western North Atlantic, particularly off South Carolina. But in the northern Gulf of Mexico, the reproductive cycle may be annual, which that's actually really cool. If it's every year, that's actually really fast for sharks. So, in South Carolina waters, the gestation period is about a year long, and following birth, the females are emaciated with small livers and appear to take a year to regain condition and develop the next batch of oocytes before they're ready to ovulate and mate in the following May. So that's a lot like dusky sharks. I mentioned that earlier, where dusky sharks, they have a very long pregnancy, and then they need a break after they give birth. So they take an equally long break. So fine-toothed sharks are reproducing faster than dusky sharks, because overall dusky sharks take 3 years. whereas fine-tooth sharks take only 2. But still, 2 is pretty long for any kind of animal, especially a marine animal. So it's, that's long. So in the northern Gulf of Mexico, individuals appear to have both near-term pups and vitellogenic oocytes, suggesting an annual cycle. This appears to be one of the few, if not only, examples of intraspecific divergence in a reproductive cycle of elasmobranch within a discrete area. So meaning not a lot of sharks seem to have such a difference in reproduction, which actually can be really interesting in the long run, because if these populations don't interbreed, if you extrapolate that to over millions of years, they could potentially become different species. But now that I think about it, Florida might be flooded in I mean, I shouldn't laugh about that because that actually could be a real thing. Millions of years, Florida might not really exist anymore, potentially, as far as sea level rise. So the two populations may converge and they may breed together. So I don't know. We'll see as time goes on. So this appears to be one of the few, if not only. Oh, sorry, I read that. Let's see. The species feeds primarily on small fish, particularly menhaden, but also spot, Spanish mackerel, mullet, and small sharp-nosed sharks. So Rhizopterodon terranovi is the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark. So it looks like fine-tooth sharks eat sharp-nosed sharks. It's kind of cool to see the chain of shark feeding. So sharp-nosed sharks are eaten by fine-tooth sharks, and fine-tooth sharks are eaten by dusky sharks. So it's kind of cool to see that. I would say, I know they didn't say that explicitly, but bull sharks probably go after fine-tooth sharks as well, because bull sharks do like smaller sharks. So, also apparently fine-tooth sharks eat shrimp, so, which makes sense. Mainly recreational anglers target the shark, although they are also taken as bycatch in demersal shrimp fisheries along the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. These sharks make up only a small portion of the small coastal shark complex that includes blacknose, Atlantic sharpnose, and bonnethead sharks. So that is a management the small coastal shark complex is an American management complex, and the reason it exists is that you can't regulate or manage sharks as a single coastal group, because the bigger sharks, they take longer to reproduce and the smaller sharks don't. So if you treat them all the same, you're kind of mismanaging the bigger sharks in the long run. So it makes sense to split them up. And it's kind of cool to see that fine-tooth sharks are in the same group as blacknose, sharpnose, and bonnetheads. I know sharpnose reproduce really quickly. Bonnetheads and blacknose sharks, I forget what their reproductive cycle is like, but I think it is appropriate that the four of them are managed together. So, at the time of this report, the population status was least concerned, so it looks like it was doing even better. This is probably about 20 years old, this guide. So, local names include the small smooth-tooth shark and the round-nosed shark. So. And that's it. So this guide actually gave us quite a bit more information, which I really like. So we'll kind of keep looking and seeing what more we can learn about the fine-tooth shark. I usually don't like deceased shark photos, but I do want to kind of go through the guide to see, or the gallery, to see if we can pick up on any details. I feel like there should be a way to look at each photo individually without really going into the details of where is this it, and then I just scroll. Can I do that? Okay, I guess I can't do that. Alright, so we'll just kind of I'll just click on the photos I think are pretty interesting. So starting with this one, this is actually really cool. It's hard to see a landed individual, but look at the eyes. I did want to highlight how beautiful that eye is. This really pretty blue here, so. Yeah, very pretty eye. I would say it's kind of unique among sharks. This photo seems pretty interesting. And that's actually really, I know it's a little blurry, but that's a good example of, again, just kind of how compressed the face looks. You know, everything is kind of concentrated towards the head. You have like a larger cheek and large gills. I definitely agree with those scientists who mentioned that the large gills are kind of a way to identify the species. I think that makes total sense. Let's see if we can find any other photos, like good photos of Finetooth Shark. I don't really want to highlight angler photos. This one looks like this individual is alive, so. Okay. So there we go, another nice shot of these really pretty eyes. This out seems a little bit more pointed, but we don't have the black tips. You know, we do have the pure white underside of the pectoral fins. So this is a finetooth. Ooh. Interesting species comparison here. These are two different sharks right here. Let's see who they are. So on the left is a finetooth shark. On the right, this might be a spinner shark. It's kind of hard to tell. We have to check the anal fin. It could be a black tip or a spinner. I kind of feel like it's a spinner, but that's actually a little shocking. Like, look how similar their heads are. You know, this is, you know, you can't blame someone mistaking this in the wild, because that's actually really hard to tell apart. And shoot, you can't see. Yeah, these are two different species. You can't quite see who the other one is with the black tips. That might be a black tip shark in the back. So this one right here is definitely a finetooth shark. Although this one's dorsal fin's a little large. But yeah. Should probably take back what I said that this one's easy to identify, because I would say, unless you're really into sharks, this actually might be a little bit more of a challenge. So no footage on YouTube, but definitely it's kind of cool to see lots of photographs. Very cool. All right. Let's see. I think this might be our last general guide, and then we'll kind of go into some research. So here we go. Finetooth Shark, Carcharhinus isodon. This is the most recent guide. Characterized by a pointed snout, shorter than the width of the mouth, slender, erect, smooth-edged teeth in both jaws. The gill slits are relatively large. The fins unmarked, and the color is bluish-gray above and white below. Again, this shark really likes menhaden and other small fishes. Sexual maturity is 5 years old. Oldest observed females were 12 years. Oldest males are 10 years. So small, kind of short-lived or shorter-lived, fairly quickly reproducing sharks. Castro, who's a very famous shark scientist for North American species in particular, described the finetooth shark as one of the least known Carcharhinus sharks in the coastal waters of the southeastern United States. The level of knowledge for the species has been improving in recent years, but the scarcity of species-specific data reduces the level of confidence in the stock status of the species. The most recent small coastal shark assessment, conducted by NIMS, National Marine Fisheries Service, in 2002, determined that stocks of finetooth were not currently overfished, but that overfishing was occurring. Fishery removals were exceeding sustainable levels. In addition, South Carolina waters represent an important pupping industry area for the fine-tooth shark. Interesting. The fine-tooth shark is the second most abundant South Carolina shark collected by a coastban study. This is Cooperative Atlantic State Shark Pupping and Nursery. I'm assuming the first is probably the sharp-nosed shark. The overfishing noted in the 2002 stock assessment that is occurring within the Southeast Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico could result in declines of the stocks if proposed measures to reduce fishing mortality are not implemented. The populations of fine-tooth sharks within South Carolina waters appear to be relatively stable within a limited time series available to date. Interesting. Habitat and natural community requirements. The first occurrence of fine-tooth sharks in estuarine waters during the spring occurs at water temperatures of approximately 75 degrees. The earliest capture of a fine-tooth individual or adult in nearshore coastal waters was in mid-May at water temperature of 72 degrees. 73 degrees. So this is a very warm water species. This species apparently initiates offshore and southerly migrations earlier than the black-nosed, sandbar, and sharp-nosed sharks, Atlantic sharp-nosed sharks. Interesting. Estuaries are clearly critical habitat for fine-tooth sharks, particularly the neonates. So, I was mistaken. It does enter estuaries, but it looks like it focuses on the ones in like the Carolinas, specifically South Carolina. Important habitats of adult fine-tooth include the mouths of coastal inlets and the shallow coastal areas off the front beaches, including the surf zone. Adult and juvenile fine-tooth frequent shallow coastal waters where bait fish such as menhaden are plentiful. Our sampling indicates that adult fine-tooth make minimum utilization of estuarine waters. Oh, okay. So juveniles use the estuaries, but the adults don't. Estuarine catches were strongly dominated by neonates, which made up 74% of the catch. Juvenile fine-tooth accounted for the majority of the remaining catch. Interesting. So like a couple other sharks, the big fine-tooth sharks go into these estuaries, which are these areas of lower salinity. They're kind of where saltwater and freshwater mix. And those are really helpful because a lot of the big sharks don't like going into them because they're not salty enough for them. And so it's kind of a safe place for the baby fine-tooth sharks to grow up. So the parents will basically drop the kids off and then leave. And then the baby fine-tooth sharks will grow safely and have a better chance of survival away from like large predatory sharks offshore, like tiger sharks or white sharks, or actually dusky sharks. Like dusky sharks can be found in like the Chesapeake Bay, but they really do not like low salinity. So pretty interesting. Fine-tooth makes up a significant portion of landings from the commercial drift gillnet fishery off the southeastern U.S. Let's see. Limited fishing mortality may occur from recreational angler harvest because of misidentification of the species. That definitely makes sense because this is probably, unless you really love sharks and like are an enthusiast, this is probably a really tricky one to identify. Unfortunately, it's probably a lot of Americans call sharks sand sharks. It's just that's not a real species. It's just like a weird bucket term for a bunch of different sharks. Like essentially, unfortunately, a lot of Americans call anything that's not a great white a sand shark, and it's just not true. So this is probably, unfortunately, a species that's often misidentified as that. So. If anglers identify the species correctly and abide by the size limit, the threat posed by the source of mortality is slight. Let's see. We actually have. Let's see. In South Carolina, most of the fine-tooth sharks are about roughly half a meter. So that is about like 2 feet long. Some of them get pretty big, but most of them are pretty. Most of them on the small side. Maintaining good water quality for the estuaries is important to the survival of neonate and juvenile finetooth sharks due to the dependence on estuary habitats as nursery grounds. South Carolina's adoption of the provisions of the highly migratory species management plan and future amendments will afford the species protection within the critical habitats occurring within state waters. Let's see. And the shark is actually, since we checked its conservation status at the beginning of the stream, it's near threatened. It's not as bad as other shark species in the same area, so that's I think that's pretty great, actually, that the shark and the population is growing slightly, but it is growing in this part of the world. So that's actually pretty interesting. This is a bit of an older document, but I think it's kind of cool to see that the aims are to kind of help protect the species, and it seems like it's been doing okay compared to other sharks. So. Let's see, conservation recommendations. I won't read all of these, but let's see. Basically, sharing data, improving public understanding, increase the public's ability to correctly identify sharks in order to comply with conservation regulations, implement a unified development plan for coastal areas, or provide for adequate buffer zones adjacent to estuaries and tidal creeks, and other actions to reduce point and non-point source pollutants in entering estuarine areas. That's actually really great, and I really appreciate any piece of action that kind of has that in mind, where like in the east coast of the U.S., we fortunately have areas that you do have a lot of coastal development, just because like beach resorts and resort areas, I mean, they're very attractive for people to visit, and they're very fun and they're really cool. But it's great that on the east coast of the U.S. we have those areas, but they're also interrupted by natural areas and protected areas. And like that's really great, because if you just had coastal development all along the coast forever, like you just don't have as many like dunes or marsh plants, that kind of help prevent erosion, that help like the fact that we have these habitats kind of helps keep the water clean, the water quality higher, and it kind of creates a safe space for these animals to grow and to live. And it ultimately kind of helps everybody, where the animals have a shot at life themselves, but for people who enjoy nature or utilize nature, like even if you're like a fisherman, at a fishing pier, those protected areas help grow a bigger catch, overall. So it's all about balance, as I think, our stream community knows, it's all about just like kind of striking that right balance and what that is in the future. As far as like you want to, like you have economic incentive, to be fishing for, either the sharks directly or their prey items. It's usually the prey items like tuna and swordfish and everything. But you want to invest in the environment to make sure that it's not only protecting these animals for their own right, but you're also ultimately protecting the stock of the species that you're targeting. Because if you just didn't have those protections, if you didn't have protected areas, if you didn't have these zones where you can give these animals a chance, their populations will collapse, as they have. I mean, there's a lot of fisheries that have collapsed, and speaking for the Bay specifically, I mean, oysters, striped bass are close to collapsing. Cod used to be in North Carolina, and that they're not there anymore. So it's important. Like conservation actions, these fisheries management plans, they're very important, for not just for sharks, but for ocean health in general. So let's see. Let's move on to. We'll kind of go through. Oh, this is a Marine Lab entry, so we'll kind of go through that. The rest of this night will be more about research, so I'll just kind of go through the abstracts. I can see not a lot of viewers tonight, which totally makes sense just with the holiday season. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably save my announcement for. I think I might just like post it later on the community page. But it's relating to a special celebration for next week with the White Shark stream, episode 100. We will have a contest, and we will have some prizes, and I'm very excited. I'll get some more details on that on the community page later. So, as kind of like a fun New Year's thing. So, but I'm super excited. Prizes may or may not include ancient Megatooth Shark related prizes. So, we'll see. This is range extension, occurrence of the Finetooth Shark in Florida Bay. Let's see what this is about. The Finetooth Shark is a migratory shark found in coastal waters of the southeastern U.S. and is well documented in the waters of northern Florida, both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. The southernmost reports along Florida's Gulf Coast are from Lemon Bay, just north of Charlotte Harbor, and from Port Salerno on Florida's Atlantic coast. 4 Finetooth sharks were captured on bottom-set longlines in Florida Bay, just north of the 25-degree latitude. Rarity sampling for sawfish. This is a critically endangered elasmobranch. Sawfish are really vulnerable. So it's kind of cool that this study found Finetooth shark in pursuit of something extremely rare and in need of extreme conservation support. So these captures extend the southern range of Carcharhinus isodon in Florida to approximately 25 degrees north, and increase the likelihood of exchange between the Atlantic and the Gulf. Interesting. So that's actually kind of cool because that relates to what I was thinking or saying earlier about, say if Florida flooded in millions of years from now, and the two populations of Finetooth sharks start interbreeding, you might kind of average out the differences in their gestation period, where the Atlantic Finetooth sharks take 2 years to reproduce. The Gulf of Mexico ones take 1 year, but it's kind of interesting. It's interesting to see that already the two might actually be intermingling a little bit. So we'll kind of scan through this. Yep. This is just really like a one-time record, so we'll move on to the next. I was just kind of hoping to see if there was like any cool like photographs or anything. So. Foraging ecology of the early life stages of 4 sympatric shark species. Looks like Finetooth shark is kind of prominently mentioned, so we'll take a look at that. So abstract. Sharks may have... Oh, actually, I usually do this. I should have done this earlier. That first article is from Tonya R. Wiley and Colin A. Simpfendorfer. So actually pretty big names in the shark world. The second article is from Dana M. Bethia, Jeffrey A. Buckle, and John K. Carlson. So, sharks may have an important role in marine ecosystems in relation to populations of fish and invertebrates at lower trophic levels. Fishery management plans stress the need for an ecosystem approach, but few quantitative studies on the foraging ecology of sharks have been published. Stomach contents and catch data of early life stages of Atlantic sharpnose, so Rhizoprion terranovae, blacktip, Carcharhinus lombatus, Finetooth, Carcharhinus isodon, and spinner sharks, Carcharhinus brevipinna, taken from fishery independent surveys in Apalachicola Bay, Florida, USA, were examined to test for overlap in resource use. Young of the year Atlantic sharpnose sharks were found to feed mainly on shrimp, juveniles on scionids, so these are drums, and adults on clopaids, so these are herring. Young of the year blacktip sharks were found to feed mainly on drums, whereas juveniles feeds on herring. The primary prey of young of the year and juvenile finetooth and spinner sharks were herring. So menhaden are kind of herring, technically. So 8 of 10 prey size selectivity tests showed that, neutral selection, compared to relative prey sizes published for Teleos piscivores. Atlantic sharpnose and finetooth sharks consume relatively small-sized prey, while blacktip sharks consume relatively large prey. Regardless of maturity state and species, diet overlap was high for species life stage combinations that are similar in size. However, species life stages did not show significant habitat overlap. Prey categories shared by similar size species may not be limiting, although shark species may have alleviated competition pressure by partition resource of time or space. Interesting. So, one little takeaway from that is I feel like it's kind of hard to pinpoint what sharks really eat. And I know that sounds kind of dumb, but unless you're a very highly specialized feeder like a basking shark, which eats plankton almost exclusively, or like a horn shark or a Port Jackson shark, which really likes shellfish. Usually sharks go after anything that's like smaller than them. And it sounds dumb, but it's like sharks are just so generalist. They do consume a wide variety of prey. The only rarity would be kind of marine mammals, I would say. So there's not a lot of sharks that actually go after marine mammals. So that's like, they're the famous ones like the tiger sharks, the white sharks, the bulls. But they actually, as far as sharks go, they're kind of the minority. They don't. There's not a lot of like sharks big enough to do that. So it's interesting to see that at least for the Finetooth shark, it does like herring and drums, and it has a preference for them. But overall, it's not really surprising that that diet overlaps with the other sharks that they're mentioned here. Just as kind of like a dumb rule of thumb, sharks typically just go after something smaller than it, or smaller than themselves. Just because they're so generalist, they're not like a very specialized feeder. Like a seahorse is a very specialized feeder. Like seahorses love brine shrimp, and they don't really eat a lot beyond that. But sharks, just by nature of just being very large compared to a lot of other animals, and just having pretty adaptable dentition, they can go after quite a variety of prey. So, even so, it is very helpful to try to pinpoint, or not try to pinpoint, but try to identify what the shark is eating, because that does help in conservation. So, like, for example, we've established that Finetooth sharks love menhaden. Menhaden are a really big fishery. Fishermen use them for fertilizer, fish meal, like bait fish. Like they're really huge industry. And if you overfish menhaden, you start to take away from the diet of the shark, because it is a big part of its diet. So it is important to identify as close to a species as you can as far as like what's in a shark's diet. But I just wanted to make that note that sharks are typically generalist feeders. So, all right. Aspects of the biology of the Finetooth shark, Carcharhinus isodon in Louisiana waters. So this is by Julie A. Neer and Bruce A. Thompson, Louisiana State University. I'll just read the intro. We won't read the entire thing. So let's see. The Finetooth shark is a moderately sized shark of the family Carcharhinidae. It's found in coastal waters in the northwestern Atlantic Ocean from North Carolina to Florida and throughout the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. This species belongs to the small coastal shark management group under the Fisheries Management Plan of the Atlantic tuna, swordfish, and sharks, and is a common component of the catch and the directed shark drift gillnet fishery off the southeast coast of the United States. In addition, the species is taken as bycatch in Gulf Menhaden Pursane fishery. The Gulf Menhaden Pursane fishery. So that's actually a good point. Again, menhaden are a huge fishery, and so it makes sense that the shark is often captured alongside them, because they are a big predator of menhaden. The current status of the Gulf of Mexico Finetooth stock, as reported by Cortez, is that it is not overfished, but overfishing is occurring. Let's see, where F is higher than FMSY. So this is I forget the right terminology, but it's like a population study measurement. So when you try to plot out population dynamics for any kind of animal, but fish especially. The occurrence of the Finetooth shark is well documented for the coastal areas off southeastern United States. Let's see, South Carolina, Florida, Salerno, Florida, Georgia, Gulf of Mexico, Dauphin Island, Alabama. Dauphin Island actually has a pretty famous marine lab. Biloxi, Mississippi, Galveston, Texas. Life history information for the species, including age, growth estimates, and aspects of its reproduction, is available for portions of the species range. A complete understanding of the species range is necessary for effective conservation and management for that species. De Silva et al. Stated that they encountered 6 fine-toothed sharks of the 726 sharks observed during their study examining the shark bycatch in the Gulf Menhaden fishery. The authors gave no details as to the capture location, thus additional documentation of the occurrence of fine-toothed sharks off Louisiana could affect future management decisions. We conducted a search for historic information on fine-toothed sharks in Louisiana. The most extensive collection of elasmeric specimens from Louisiana waters was contained at the Tulane Museum of Natural History. 8 species of sharks were identified, but no fine-toothed shark specimens were found. In addition, we electronically examined 14 other natural history museums for records of sharks collected in Louisiana. No museum records of the fine-toothed shark could be located. Finally, we examined 2 research reports produced by university personnel and 3 data sets provided by state and federal agencies. The occurrence of the fine-toothed shark in Louisiana was not documented in either the research reports or the data sets. In this article, report on the occurrence and aspects of the biology of fine-toothed sharks in coastal Louisiana waters. Interesting. I'm kind of curious if they caught any. Oh, they did. They did catch quite a few during the study. Okay. That's good. Okay, interesting. So just kind of scanning through this, the paucity of documented records of the fine-toothed shark in Louisiana may be due to a species misidentification by both recreational anglers and scientific personnel not trained in shark identification. So, again, I probably should take back what I said earlier. This is a difficult species to identify. Although the species lacks black fin tips on the pectoral and lower lobe of the caudal fin, its size and body shape could be misidentified as another species of Carcharhinus, such as the black-tip shark, especially to an angler who sees a shark at the end of the fishing line. Alternatively, smaller fine-toothed sharks may be confused with the Atlantic sharpnose shark. These species have similar silver-gray coloration, and the fine-toothed shark may be identified as the Atlantic sharpnose shark without spots. Low abundance in the fine-toothed shark in Louisiana waters may also have also contributed to the few documented records. So it sounds like it naturally isn't very common in Louisiana, but maybe the few times it's been seen, it's been confused with other species. So. Okay. This is going to be pretty interesting. Investigating life history differences between fine-toothed sharks, Carcharhinus isodon, in the northern Gulf of Mexico and the western Atlantic Ocean. So remember they said that these two populations reproduce differently. So it's going to be pretty interesting. So this is by J. Marcus Dryman, William B. Driggers III, Douglas Oakley, and Glenn F. Ulrich. Okay. The life history of the fine-toothed shark, Carcharhinus isodon, off South Carolina was studied by determining age, growth, and size and age of maturity. These data were compared to a recent study describing the same parameters for fine-toothed sharks in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Cervical vertebrae were extracted from 168 specimens, ranging in size from 376 to, we'll just say 0.3 to 1.2 meters. So that's about 3 feet, so a foot to 3 feet. And prepare for age analysis using standard techniques. I won't read these in detail. The oldest female and male were 12 and 10 years respectively. Here we go. Fine-toothed sharks in the western North Atlantic Ocean had higher observed ages, and there was a significant difference in size at age between neonate fine-toothed sharks in the western North Atlantic Ocean and the northern Gulf of Mexico. However, there were no significant differences among von Bertalanffy, that's a really famous parameter, I should know how to pronounce it, growth function parameters between regions examined. Results indicate lower amounts of regional variation in life history parameters for fine-toothed sharks when compared to other small coastal sharks. Let me read that again. Lower amounts of regional variation in life history parameters for fine-toothed sharks when compared to other small coastal sharks. Interesting. So this study is saying that even though the Atlantic ones get bigger, their actual growth rate is not really that different between the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. Interesting. Okay, we don't need to go through super fisheries data. Yeah, we'll just kind of keep hopping along. But a lot of research on the species. I was really pleasantly surprised when kind of prepping for the stream to see that there was as much as there was, really. So, The Reproductive Biology of the Finetooth Shark in the Northwest Atlantic Ocean by Amanda Brown. Let's see. It's a master's thesis from 2015. Really cool. Oh, actually, a lot of the same Dryman is here, so a lot of familiar faces. Let's see. Abstract. I just want to read the abstract. We don't need to go through the entire thesis. Let's see. Shark fisheries are a multi-million-dollar industry in the United States and have significant contributions both recreationally and commercially. In order to maintain this industry, fisheries must be properly managed. An understanding of life history and reproduction is crucial in order to adequately manage shark fisheries. The Finetooth Shark, by the way, whoever, that's a really great, nice introduction. It's like all these books and all these like articles, all these papers, they do reemphasize this point over and over again. But I actually really like how this was phrased. So kudos to the author for kind of succinctly summing that up in a pretty clean way. I actually really like how they wrote that. So. The Finetooth Shark Carcharhinus isodon is a member of the small coastal shark fishery complex. It is found in Atlantic waters from South Carolina to Florida and throughout the Gulf of Mexico. This species has recently come under increased fishing pressure and has previously been overfished. New data is needed in order to properly assess the reproductive capacity of the species so that healthy populations can be sustained. This study evaluated the overall reproductive cycle of Northwest Atlantic populations of Carcharhinus isodon using composite variables of morphology, histology, and endocrinology. Atlantic finetooth sharks are found to display seasonal reproduction with biennial reproductive periodicity with a 12-month gestation period and litters of 2 to 6 pups. We don't need to read that. I mean, I guess we could read that. Sorry. I don't know if that's estrogen and testosterone. It might be. E2 and T. I think that's estrogen and testosterone, but it could be. Actually, you know what? That actually could be it. And I apologize if that's not what this is. It's been a while since I've kind of seen this kind of like population biology, but here we go. I'm assuming that estrogen and testosterone displayed similar patterns that were highest during gametogenesis, so production of gametes. Progesterone, if I'm understanding it correctly, did not show any discernible patterns. Estrogen receptors were found in developing follicles of gravid and non-gravid females, in the oviductal glands of non-gravid and early pregnant females, and in the uterus of pre-ovulatory females. Progesterone, or P4, was found in the oviductal glands in all reproductive stages and in the uterus of pre-ovulatory females. By the way, it's really cool. Sharks are so different from us, evolutionarily, and yet it's kind of cool that they have analogous features to our own. It's kind of amazing to think about sharks going through like pregnancy and birth, and like their hormones are changing. It's so cool. It's so interesting. Not all sharks do this. A third of sharks, roughly a third, lay eggs. Roughly a third do like ovoviviparity, and then a third do this kind of placental viviparity. So it's analogous to humans. It's not the same, but it's strikingly close, actually. Androgen receptors are found in sertoli cells and mature spermatozoa, as well as epididymal epithelial cells. So, I'm going to read through the introduction. I'll just scan through it. Just to see if there's any new biology. We know that it does seasonal migrations. Okay. So, The diet is, this is menhaden. Leostomus is a drum. I forget. I think that's spot actually. So menhaden and spot, and then crustaceans. This is blue crabs. So menhaden, spot, blue crabs. Really classic estuary, like East Coast estuary species. Sparidae. I forget what that is. Cygnathidae is pipefish and seahorses. Caragnidae is jacks. Sparidae is, I forget what this is. Just kind of curious. We'll look it up really quick. Is that snappers? Porgies. Okay, Sparidae is porgies. Gotcha. So the Finetooth Shark is a member of the small coastal shark fishery management complex, which is largely composed of fast-growing, small-bodied, short-lived sharks. Other members of this group include the bonnethead, the Atlantic sharpnose, and a black-nosed shark. Although species, I really like this thesis. Although species of the large coastal shark fishery complex are more coveted by commercial fishermen, management initiatives enacted in the late 90s restricted commercial catches of this group, shifting some fishing pressure to small coastal sharks. Recreational fishing and commercial bycatch and gillnet fisheries also account for the mortality of fine-toothed sharks. Okay, just kind of want to scan through to see if we have any cool like photographs or charts. Don't really need to. I'm not really a fan of going into the shark's anatomy, so we'll kind of keep looking. More anatomy. Here are our pups, though. Some cells under a microscope, so yeah, so these are I'll just read the figure. Transverse sections of male fine-toothed shark testes taken at different stages of spermatogenesis. So again, kind of amazing how analogous sharks are to mammals in a lot of ways. So especially reproduction. I think this is transverse section of ovaries from mature females. It is really amazing that these are two mammals and sharks, two very different groups, and yet they have a lot of analogs between them, reproduction-wise. So it's very, very interesting. I'm just kind of scanning through because again, we don't need to do the whole thesis, but I just want to see if there's any interesting stuff. Now it's 10:30. We typically name a shark for next week, but as we all know, next week is stream. Oh, hey Howard, what's up? Welcome back. Good evening. Good to see you. Reproductive rates seem to be a consistent theme in population resilience. Yes, absolutely. Because as we all know, like sharks. It's good to see you. Happy holidays, by the way. It's, as we all know, oh, and thank you, by the way, while you're here, thank you again for, I had your art up. There we go. Thank you again for submitting this really great piece of art. I loved the menhaden because it's just such a cool fish and a really important fish biologically. These guys are like a direct link between phytoplankton and large predators like sharks. So it was just really cool to see, like, it clearly is a favorite species, a prey item species for the fine-toothed shark, but I really love that attention to detail, and it was just near and dear to me because menhaden are just such an important link in the food chain for sharks, especially for the Chesapeake Bay, so it's just like, that's just really cool. So thank you so much for your art. This is so cool to see. But reproductive success is a huge thing for sharks, because like as we all know, sharks are infamously slow to grow and slow to reproduce, and they usually have kind of like smaller litters compared to a lot of other animals. So it is kind of cool to see that, like with fine-tooth sharks, you know, they're part of a group of sharks that, from a shark perspective, they grow fairly quickly. And it's part of what's kind of helping them out a little bit. So, but yeah. So it's kind of cool. I was just about to say, I checked the chat the minute I started to say this. So we typically pick a shark for next week. But you know, as we all know, it's episode 100. We've done 100 streams as of next week. And it's actually really cool that lines up with the new year pretty nicely. So this is our last stream of 2024. Next week will be stream number 100, the first stream in 2025, and as we decided, the Great White, Carcharhinus. As cliche as it is, I do think it's very fitting. So what I do want to do on that stream, and I wanted to kind of preview it tonight a little bit, but I wanted to launch a new shark art contest. It's long overdue, but I think this is a really good stream to launch it, and then the submissions will be accepted the week after. So not next week, but like after. So, but yeah, just as a heads up, we will do a new shark art contest. I think the theme is going to be either the white shark itself or just a mackerel shark of any kind. So to include the great white, or it could be Atodus or Carcharhinus, like any of the ancient megatooth sharks, or even the modern mako sharks or porbeagle sharks. But really cool way to, great white to bring in the new year. Yeah, absolutely. Really cool thing to do to bring in the new year. And as a prize, I'm kind of putting together the prize package, but definitely a megtooth, a confirmed megalodon tooth, definitely a Carcharhinus angustitis tooth. And I think I could scrounge up some more for like a nice brand, like a New Year giveaway. So yeah, more to come. I will have the contest details officially ready for next week's stream. But I think making it like mackerel shark theme, and including the megatooth sharks, some modern mackerel sharks, and then the ancient fossil like megatooth shark line. I think it'll be really cool to do it, and a great way to kind of rein in 2025. So, but yeah, more to come. I will have more details on that. But thank you for hopping on tonight. Only appropriate that you're the first to know as far as just a shark art contest. So again, love all the submissions that you've shared this year. I do want to do something next year. Soon where we do review the art, so I do want to see if I can phone up a colleague to review art with them, so more to come on that. But either way, we're going to launch 2025 with a shark art contest, and I'm really excited. It's been long overdue. I would say it's just been long overdue. So but yeah, more to come on details for that, so very excited. Only way to rein in 2025. So, but we have a couple more articles to skim through for the fine-tooth shark, so we'll keep going. Age, growth, and maturation of the fine-tooth shark in the western North Atlantic. Let's see. It's pretty much the same thing, but we'll read this anyway. I won't read the whole thing, but many lancerynx display K-selected life history characteristics, making species-specific life history parameters critical to development and the most accurate stock assessment models. Age, growth, and maturity were examined for fine-tooth sharks in the coastal waters of the western North Atlantic Ocean, from Winyah Bay, South Carolina to Cape Canaveral, Florida. Actually, I might skip ahead to a different study because it's already 10:40, and we'll see if we can get something that's other than population dynamics. Here's a cool cross-section of a shark vertebrae, though. It's kind of hard to tell, but you do read these like the growth rings of a tree. So you can kind of very faintly see the rings a little bit, but they're very hard to tell. And actually, shark vertebrae are kind of notoriously difficult to read and potentially unreliable. It depends on where the shark lives, but it's the same thing as like I I mean, actually, let me go back to that because it is kind of a cool subject, and let's see if we can find. So, yeah, it's really hard to tell. It's just like because like the resolution isn't super great on this, but and I'm actually even trying to. Okay, so if you were to look at this, yes, okay, so the spinal cord would go, or not the spinal cord, the notochord would be going up and down, like vertically. Like it would go through the center. So this is the outer edge of the vertebrae on the left, and then on the right is the center of the vertebrae, and the notochord would be going like a pole or a rod through the center. And what we're doing is we took like a cut right through it, like kind of like this is a stupid analogy, but like I'm a big brie person. I like or a big cheese person. And if you cut through, like if you have like a wheel of brie and you just lay the wheel of brie down and you cut through the side of it, or if you cut it in half, this is basically what we're looking at. We're like looking at the cheese inside. This is a terrible analogy. It was the holidays. This is the first one I could think of. Anyway, point being, you can read growth rings on shark vertebrae like the growth rings of a tree. And the reason that growth rings happen is that, like in a tree, during summer, when the sun is out, like in temperate areas, when the sun is out, the tree is growing enormously. It's photosynthesizing. It's getting all of that sunlight and making all of that, all the leaves, all the chlorophyll, are processing everything. So the tree deposits as it grows, like a lot of I guess wood, bark, nutrients. I'm not exactly sure what makes the growth ring, but it deposits a big band of material, like minerals and pretty evident deposits during the summer. Then when it's winter, when the sun is at its lowest point and the tree is like not photosynthesizing, it has this thin band where there aren't those mineral deposits because the tree is not growing. It's not photosynthesizing. Similarly with sharks, we all know that sharks eat other animals. They don't photosynthesize, right? But they do consume animals on a seasonal basis because ultimately all the animals are going back to phytoplankton, where like the root of the food chain is still phytoplankton and the amount of phytoplankton that's produced. So you're still going to have these periods of like a lot of consumption and a lot of like food consumption and the deposition of a certain kind of mineral in the summer versus the winter where you don't have as many resources or you don't have the same kind of mineral being deposited because ultimately you're not eating animals that are photosynthesizing. You're eating something else. Now that being said, I'm immediately starting to see like how shark growth rings can be tricky because it's like, well, the shark is eating year round, so it may not be. You can easily see how this starts to get kind of tricky. You can still, because phytoplankton is seasonal no matter what, you can still like make assessments based on the growth rings where you can still see like periods of thick bands indicating like periods of abundance where the shark is like eating during the summer because ultimately the ocean in the temperate zone is like very abundant because there's all this phytoplankton growth during the summer, and then periods of lean, which is typically during the winter. And so from that you can infer the age of the shark when you see like the thick and thin lines during the growth rings. But the thing that I'm thinking about now is like, well, what about a shark that migrates from a temperate zone to a tropical zone? Because photosynthesis occurs all the time in tropical waters. There's no real seasonal... there is some seasonal variation, but it's not the same as the temperate zone. So I think the fact that sharks are so migratory, that actually makes the growth ring stuff a little tricky. Hey, Roy, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Sorry, I was in the middle of a kind of like quandary about growth rings. I was trying to illustrate that like the idea behind them, but as I was doing it, I was starting to kind of realize, well, but that still doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's starting to become evident why growth rings are I don't want to say they're unreliable, but they're kind of shaky. Like some scientists don't really like them or don't like using them because it's kind of they're kind of weird as far as aging a shark. So sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent. But while you're here, Roy, I don't know if you caught this, but I was sharing with Howard. So next week, as we know, is going to be episode 100 with the Great White. And to kick off the new year, we're going to launch a shark art contest with prizes. So, and I think I'll announce the details on next week's stream. But I think the theme is going to be just as kind of like just as a heads up. I think it's going to be Megatooth Shark or White Shark or Mackerel Shark. So the artwork would be pertaining to anything in the Lamnid family. So Mako sharks, white sharks, poor beagle sharks, salmon sharks, or the Megatooth Shark, like the extinct Megatooth Shark. So it could be Carcharhinus, it could be Otodus, anything that's kind of in that group. I think it'll be kind of cool to do a contest. And as a prize, there will be, I would say, my best Megalodon tooth, as well as a couple Anguistidens teeth. So, and I think I can probably, I'm trying to find a worthy book recommendation. I have one in mind, so, but I'll keep that under wraps. But yeah, I'll make a prize pack because it's been long overdue. But yeah, as a heads up, it is going to be mackerel shark, Megatooth Shark, Lamnid Shark themed. So, so stay tuned. The official contest launches next week. But I think it's only fair for those who are hopping on during the holiday season. A little bit of a hint, a little bit of a head start if you want to submit art. So more details to come. But get excited. It's the only way to celebrate the 100th stream. So I'm very excited for that for next week. So we'll launch it next week, and then we'll finish the contest the week after. So let's see. This is another study on. This is a big subject. The differences between the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico finetooth sharks. So we'll just. Was this the same one with the growth rings? Am I being silly? No, this is a different one. Okay. I'll kind of skip ahead to see if there's a different kind of study. Here we go. This one, is this the... Oh, this one is really cool. The finetooth shark might be briefly mentioned, but I do love this article. This is from Charles Bangley, or Chuck Bangley, Lee Paramore, Simon Dedman, and Roger A. Rulifson. Delineation and mapping of coastal shark habitat within a shallow lagoonal estuary. So this is Pamlico Sound, North Carolina. Let me go ahead and skip ahead. So finetooth sharks do live here, but this is kind of the northern end of their range. So they don't really, I don't think they're going to be featured predominantly in the study. That's a shame. But let me show you why this is one of my favorites. You might have seen this before. But this study is extremely cool, because it goes into detail what makes, I don't know if anyone's like familiar with like the Outer Banks or coastal North Carolina, but it's a really cool area. I personally love the Carolina coastline. I do love visiting. And my favorite spots are probably, I would say, Duck, which is in kind of the northern side. Jockey's Ridge, beautiful park. Love that area. I do love Cape Hatteras. Cape Hatteras is awesome. It's kind of like this... It's kind of like the border between true subtropical and true temperate species. It's a big convergent zone of two major different marine ecoregions. So, but anyway, sorry. The kind of like triangular shape here, this is the Outer Banks, like where my mouse is. I don't know if you... Yeah, you can see that probably. This is the Outer Banks. So these are the beaches, the Outer Banks, and like this white area is the actual Atlantic Ocean. The blue area is the Pamlico Sound complex, which is an estuary within the Outer Banks. It's inside. It's on the inside of the barrier islands. The dunes protect this area, and then up here are like the Pamlico and Neuse rivers. But this is a really cool study because this actually details the habitat, and then it actually will detail where the sharks go. So we'll look at that in a second. But so you can see the Outer Banks, the Pamlico Sound area, very shallow. There's some deep holes in the center of the sound. but overall very shallow, especially when you get close to the Barrier Islands, which makes sense because they're just sand. SAV is submerged aquatic vegetation distance. So if I'm reading this correctly, this is an area of low vegetation. This is an area of high vegetation. And then this is inlet distance. So this is how far a habitat is away from inlets, which is inversely kind of related to salinity, like how salty or fresh an area is. So the bluer the color, the saltier it is. The lighter the color, the fresher it is. Oh, and here you go. You have temperature. It's warm kind of throughout in the summer, more patchy in the fall. Salinity, you have differences between summer and fall, but again, the blue is saltier, the green is more fresh. Dissolved oxygen. Oh, you got winter too. Cool. So, yeah. What's really cool is, like, this study maps out all these parameters for North Carolina, but then it plots it out with shark distribution. Like, where can you find maximum likelihood of certain shark species? So here we go. This is what makes this study extremely cool for me. So you've got the Atlantic Carcharhinus shark. This guy likes to be in these two green areas here. So these are actually mouths of inlets. Specifically, this is Ocracoke Inlet. I'm not sure what this one is. Organ inlet's in here. So I don't know. One of these is Ocracoke, but I forget what the other one. Anyway. But you can see that the shark likes to be really close to the ocean. It likes to be really close to that passage to salt water. Same with the blacktip shark. Again, the highest probability is to find it close to the inlet, so it wants to be near salt water. The bull shark doesn't want that at all. What's really cool is that the bull shark wants to be closer to the river mouths because it's able to exploit more prey items away from other shark species. So you actually are more likely to find a bull shark closer to the river than you are to the actual beach in the Outer Banks. Sandbar sharks are pretty interesting because they are not really like inlet huggers like the other shark species. These guys definitely like salty water. They want to be away from the bull sharks, but they actually still enjoy the main body of the estuary, so it's actually really cool. It kind of reminds me of Jurassic Park 3, where I guess one of the characters was like, the bigger dinosaurs are on the inside of the island, and the smaller ones are on the outside of the island, or something like that. I don't know. Dusky smoothhounds, this is actually really funny, also known as smooth dogfish. These sharks want to avoid the predators, so these guys actually stick really close to shallow water, close to the beach, close to the shore, and they probably like to occupy areas that do have a lot of seagrass. And then spiny dogfish, also known as pike dogfish, they're kind of similar. They want to be in shallow water as well. Although these guys come by in the winter, so they don't really have to they don't have to worry about predators like the smooth dogfish do. They don't have to worry about bull sharks, because smooth dogfish do, because they're there at the same time of year. But it's a really cool study. Let me go ahead and put it in a chat, because this is actually one of my favorite shark studies I've ever seen, period. Like, I wish they did this study on the Chesapeake Bay, because it's just super cool. And they might have, and maybe I haven't seen it yet, but if you're a fan of the Outer Banks or North Carolina, or just North Carolina sharks or shark estuary habitat use, like, this study is awesome. So one of the best out there. So yeah, kudos to that. Let's see. Bulls Bay, South Carolina. What is this one? It says that Finetooth sharks have a unique niche in South Carolina, but doesn't really go into detail, unfortunately. So, let me make sure. Finetooth shark. Oh, there we go. Just want to scan through this. Finetooth sharks and blacktip sharks have the lowest amount of isotropic variation. I just want to figure out kind of what the meaning in that is. So here we go. Finetooth sharks and cownose rays had no dietary niche overlap with any other species. Finetooth sharks and cownose rays had isotropic signatures very similar to those of phytoplankton, suggesting that those predators relied heavily on the planktonic food web. That's actually really interesting, because finetooth sharks eat menhaden primarily, and as I said earlier, menhaden, they eat plankton. Like, menhaden are kind of like miniature whales. Like, they have these gill rakers. They open their mouths and swim through the water column. Kind of like a little basking shark, actually. That's probably a better analogy. Where they collect plankton, and because they are able to access that resource directly, they're some of the most energy-rich fish out there. And it's interesting that this is saying that finetooth sharks have a similar trophic signature to phytoplankton, where it's like, or isotopic signature to phytoplankton, which, because like, since finetooth sharks eat menhaden directly, they probably, it makes sense that they're more like are getting that direct energy path more than other shark species that eat other kinds of fish. As far as the rays go, I know that cownose rays love shellfish, so they love oysters, and they love clams, and crabs. I don't immediately see the connection there. I mean, I know oysters are filter feeders, and I guess oysters will filter feed phytoplankton, kind of like the menhaden, and I guess clams do that too, so that might be the connection, but I don't know. Let's see. Red drum, finetooth sharks, and cownose rays had large areas of unique isotopic niche space, indicating possible instances of resource partitioning. Finetooth sharks and blacktip sharks had the tightest clustering of isotopic signatures, which suggests a specialized diet. Both of these shark species are considered to be piscivorous, meaning fish, and this was confirmed by the stable isotope values. Let's see. Finetooth sharks and cownose rays relied almost strictly on the planktonic food web. Oh, there you go. Cownose rays are known to feed heavily on filter-feeding bivalve mollusks, and therefore cownose rays provide a great reference for the planktonic food web. The diets of finetooth sharks within Gulf of Mexico estuaries include a very high proportion of planktivorous Atlantic menhaden, and this feeding is supported by our SIA results. So it looks like the finetooth shark specifically really focuses on menhaden, and that actually kind of makes sense that this shark can get as big as it can get with these uniquely small teeth that are equal in shape on the upper and lower jaw, and are uniquely, like, they're thin and perfect for like stabbing prey. So they do suggest, piscivorous dentition. They do suggest fish-eating dentition. So that's actually kind of interesting that, that the tooth shape kind of relates to the fact that this shark likes to eat a specific kind of fish. It can still get to be a pretty large size with that unique tooth shape. And it kind of relates to what this article is talking about. That's actually pretty cool. In terms of like the finetooth shark having kind of like a more like unique diet compared to other sharks. Pretty interesting. Okay, it's actually a cool study. I scanned through it, but the takeaway from that study is actually really cool. So. We won't read that. We won't read that. I want to see if there's anything else about the finetooth shark specifically that's not reproductive related. There's a lot of reproduction studies on the species, but I think we kind of get the gist that the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico populations don't really operate in the same way. I think we'll end with this, because this is kind of interesting. Multiple paternity in two populations of finetooth sharks with varying reproductive periodicity. Okay, alright, this is interesting. The mechanisms underlying polyandry and female mate choice in certain taxonomic groups remain widely debated. In Lazarbank, several species have shown varying rates of polyandry based on genetic studies of multiple paternity. I don't know if you guys remember this, but we did I think we covered that with the sicklefin lemon shark. I think sicklefin lemon sharks, gosh, that's Negoprion acutidens. They do something very similar. I forget if this was early last year or the year before, but we learned that those sharks are kind of kinky, which is kind of funny. But we investigated MP, so multiple paternity, in the Finetooth Shark, Carcharhinus isodon, in order to directly test the encounter rate hypothesis, which predicts that multiple paternity is a result of the frequency of encounters between mature conspecifics during the breeding season, and should therefore increase when more time is available for copulation and sperm storage. Female finetooth sharks in northern Gulf of Mexico have been found to reproduce with both annual periodicity and biennial periodicity, while finetooth sharks in the northwest Atlantic Ocean have only been found to reproduce biennially. So this is extremely interesting. The Atlantic Ocean finetooth sharks reproduce every 2 years. We originally thought that the Gulf of Mexico finetooth sharks reproduce every year, but it's actually every year and every 2 years, which is kind of wild. Allowing us to compare mating opportunity to frequency of multiple paternity. Our results show higher rates of multiple paternity with no significant difference in frequency between females in Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic, and varying but non-significant rates of multiple paternity between females in the Gulf of Mexico, reproducing annually and biennially. It looks like ultimately, okay, so the encounter rate hypothesis is not supported by this study. It remains possible that reproductive periodicity and other physiological factors play a role in determining rates of multiple paternity in lesbrinks, with potential benefits to individuals and populations. I'm just going to scan through the graphs of this. There's a nice, it's actually kind of a nice photograph of a finetooth shark right there. Probably a recently deceased individual, but again, you get that kind of those features we've been seeing where like the face is a little bit more compressed. There's no conspicuous markings on the fins, and the the gills are fairly large for a shark of this kind. So, and I think we'll wrap up after that. Well, I guess we'll wrap up now because there's no other charts on this. I think they were testing multiple paternity hypothesis with this species, and again, we have seen it with other sharks, but it's not really. Looks like it's not really super supported. Oh yeah, no evidence for population level benefits of polyandry in sharks and rays. So looks like it's not super supported. So all right. Well, I think since it's 11, we'll probably wrap up for the night. But hope you guys are having a really good holiday season. As you can see, I love this time of year, and I'm wearing this is my classic shark ugly sweater. So it's that time of the year. So, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I appreciate it was really nice to kind of take last week off and just kind of enjoy family for the holidays. But I'm excited to be back, and I'm glad you guys were here to share the last trip of 2024 with me with the Finetooth Shark. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, and next week is episode 100, the Great White Shark, Carcharhinus, and the launch of our shark contest into 2025. So I'm super excited. Stay tuned and get ready. I hope you guys, I wish you guys luck as far as a head start on the contest, where it's going to be, again, mackerel shark themed, and I'm excited to see you there next week. So stay tuned. It's going to be a really cool year and a really bombastic way to start the year. So thank you, Roy. Happy New Year to you too. Thank you, Howard. Happy New Year. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fun and safe New Year's Eve tomorrow, and enjoy the new year with your family or friends or whoever. Just hope you have a really great time tomorrow night, and stay up for the ball drop or whatever the celebration is. I'm going to try my best. I feel like as I get older, it becomes less and less certain that I make it. I think I still can make it, but we'll see. So anyway, tune in next week for the White Shark. Good night, and Happy New Year, everybody. Take care. Bye.